Ken DeFoor, Jamie Stafford, welcome to the C-suite.
Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you on. I have so many questions. I did a ton of research. I looked online and I go through my process for my guests, but I had selfish questions instead of the kind of the normal questions I'd go through, and it's for any number of reasons. We just have different parallel interests. I have to share my first brush with the DeFoor property management or with you and Byron. I started the Gun Barrel Merchant Association 25 years ago, and it was when I was still a financial advisor at UBS, and I was trying to get into the community. I'm new to the community. I've always been a hairbenders here for the last 24 years, but in an effort to meet people, because my in-laws had such a strong presence on Gun Barrel, I thought it would be interesting to have everybody communicating about what their needs were on Gun Barrel. If there was crime, if people were breaking into cars, they have a tendency to make their way down, Gun Barrel Road. But I was working with Jack Benson and Larry Henry. We got that park established on East Brainerd Road, down the way a little bit. But the Golden Triangle is that property that they called where the Embassy Suites and Ruth's Chris is. And it was going to be like the next coming of the next greatest real estate development. And it consumed so many of our conversations because it was going to be part of Gun Barrel and the development of that property. And so anyway, I never got to meet you at that point when you guys were initially developing and going through all the zoning processes. I think there was some difficulty there. Am I wrong in that? Was that a smooth transition to developing that property, or was that just status quo?
It had a history. Historically, was very difficult to, to get to the zoning process, and it was difficult for us. We did prevail in the long run, but there was some community leaders across the street in the subdivision that made my life a little difficult. But we got through it.
I have a bunch of questions, everything from religion to real estate development, what the future looks like. If I asked you in a nutshell how you got from A to Z, and that is whenever you set out to be an entrepreneur, and Andrew calls it a serial entrepreneur, when you're getting in certain areas and you just keep pushing, you keep growing, you keep expanding. What would you say if you had to put it on one principle that got you to this point today?
Well, I think persistence is the main thing, because nobody that's in the business usually ends up where they think they will be when they start out. It never ends the same way, ever. So it's just a persistent thing, and keeping your eyes open, your ears open. When I lecture students today, finance students, I tell them to get your earbuds out, be aware of what's going on around you, be inquisitive, be looking, because in this business, it is not, there's no textbook on this. You just have to go with it and trust your gut feeling a lot of times, and a little divine guidance doesn't hurt at all. So, there's just no way of knowing how it's all going to end,
Are you teaching currently?
I'm sorry?
Are you teaching currently?
I just lecture. I'm not a teacher, but I do get asked to lecture students.
So today's students, how do they compare and contrast to when you were coming up and you were their age?
They don't. Now, I am encouraged by, I say they don't because, look, my dad grew up in, he was born in 1926, and I thought I worked pretty hard as a young person coming up. He never thought I worked as hard as he did. I don't think my kids work as hard as I did. It's just a generational thing. But considering that when I was growing up, you had didn't have the economic opportunities that you have today. My brother and me grew up on a dirt road in North Georgia, a chicken farm, a cotton farm. Matter of fact, people want to know, well, where did you go to college, or what part of Chattanooga did you live in? When I was 5 years old, my mother was in a cotton field pulling a pick sack pregnant with my brother. That's where we came from. Uh, we had we just had really good parents that were determined that I would be the first man to ever go to college in my family, and they stuck by that. And eventually, we all three went to college, and good people. But we have seen what it's like to really start from very humble beginnings, and it was good for me to see that. It still affects me today. I mean, I live on a dirt driveway. My kids used to say, "Well, Daddy, why don't you pave that lawn? It's 600 feet long. And, you get your car washed, you come home, your car's dirty." And I said, "I'm never paving that driveway because every time I come down that driveway, it reminds me of how hard my dad and mother had to work so that I could get where I am today." And I'm not, I think I could always do better, but I guess we've done okay.
I would say you guys did okay. I love that story. One of the I'm a huge fan of working hard. I think one of the value added benefits that Harry and I brought to a legacy business, and I know several of your kids are working inside the DeFoor umbrella, was hard work, but with a combination of working smart. And the one thing that we had to be constantly aware of, because in hair aesthetics, things are always changing. It's not just the trends for artistically, but the business trends are changing. And what got you to here is not what got you to here is not going to get you to there. And so, with that being said, what have you noticed in real estate, for example, in the last several decades that have changed that you've been able to pivot to continue to grow? And then you guys made the jump from, just real estate development to the hotel industry.
Well, I think if you're asking me, one of the most dramatic changes I've ever seen happened in 2008. I mean, you talk about the Golden Triangle.
Absolutely.
And we call it Waterside. I mean, Waterside was planned to be the love story of development, the first real, drawing a blank here, lifestyle center. We didn't have one. And you go to these other successful cities, and there was this little niche of all this retail and office combination and restaurants. We spent an incredible amount of resources and time and cash getting the right layout, the right lakes in there, the right water features, and we get up one morning in 2009, and there is no retail. Nobody's coming. It stopped. I had the most successful, I think, medical office business that had ever been in Chattanooga. I mean, not the biggest, but I had the first concept where you could own your office cheaper than you could pay rent. And it was working like nothing I'd ever seen. And I get up one morning and it's over. Medicare, Obamacare took care of that. And all the doctors are running for cover. They weren't interested in on their own. So those were the two most dramatic things. I mean, you always have the recessions, and I've been to the SNL closings. And, as a kid, I went to 23. I saw the first, Arab and last, thank goodness, Arab oil embargo. But I was so young, it was just starting out. I didn't know that was an anomaly or that wouldn't never happen again. But I think the meltdown in end of 2008, I was in New York the day it happened. I saw these people walking out of Lehman Brothers with trash cans. They were emptying their desk out that day.
It's gone. Lehman Brothers is gone.
And I couldn't figure out what was going on until I get to my hotel room and turn on the 6 o'clock news. And you have to think that's where news really began, New York. Their 6 o'clock guys are better than a lot of network guys.
Mm-hmm.
And they just said, anybody's got any money right now, you better hang on to it. You better hang on to your cash because we don't know where this is going. So to me, as a grown man and someone who'd been in business quite a while, I think that was probably the most dramatic thing I've ever seen in my career. It was just over, done.
Did it change the way you did business? Did it change like
Yeah.
with cash, the holdings, whatever you cash reserves, or your philosophy on how you guys bought and sold or developed?
Well, fortunately, I'd had such good years. I did have some reserves, and thank goodness because I needed them, the next 7 or 8 years. But yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the real pushes that we got interested in the hotel business. My brother was really the driver on the hotel thing. I couldn't figure out really why we were doing it. We didn't know anything about it, but we had this great property here at Waterside, and we'd been courted by, courted by other, entities, but it didn't fit. There were a grocery store. We didn't want a grocery store right on Gun Barrel, so it just came along that we knew some people that were in the hotel business in Atlanta, and they were instrumental in helping us get a Embassy Suites franchise. Just to tell you how tough it'd been, that was the first Embassy Suites that had been built in 5 years in America.
Really?
Yeah. So that's how tough it was because financing was just unheard of. It was fortunate my brother was in a really strong position in the healthcare business. He had a ton of nursing homes and assisted living, and he wanted to forge on through, and we did. It was one of the best moves I ever made.
I was shocked when we got an Embassy Suites in Chattanooga, and then to follow that with a Ruth's Chris. And I understand the relationship between Embassy Suites and Ruth's Chris, but to get those, it felt like an enormous upgrade. Our household income in Chattanooga is $57,000, and if you remove a handful of families from that population, that number drops dramatically. I mean, we have a lot of Tom and Janes. It's not a lot of the Joneses, but I think it's been a massive upgrade. Whenever somebody comes here for education, when we have professional speakers come in, that's where we send them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there were naysayers for years that said Chattanooga would never support a Ruth. Oh, it's a hamburger and hot dog town. You'll never get this. You'll never get that. Embassy Suites is very risky. Well, Embassy Suites, if you talk to real hotel people, they'll tell you that's the darling of the brand. You get a free breakfast, you get free drinks and appetizers in the afternoon. You can pop out a couch and you got your kids covered. It's really a value. It's tremendous value. And then, oh no, Ruth Chris will never. Well, we met a guy who had quite a few Ruth Chris in Atlanta and Birmingham, and they all were on the first floor of the Embassy Suites around in those areas. And he came up, I think he had 8 or 10 of them. Well, Chattanooga became his number one branch.
Wow.
So that just tells you, you have to listen to people. You have to be realistic. But it was just, we thought that analogy was flawed, that they would come if they were here. I mean, it's an event place to eat. I mean, how many people have anniversaries? How many people want to take their mom out on Mother's Day? I mean, when Valentine's come, I mean, they start, Valentine's always on Thursday. Well, they're booked up like the Tuesday before all through that weekend. It's an event place. Now, there are occasions you want to take your wife out and do something special or an anniversary or something, or maybe you had a really good month and you want to spend a little extra money, but the Ruth Chris does well.
We have our staff meetings at the Westin, the Embassy Suites. Whenever we brought our speakers in or we take our staff off location, we go exclusively to the Embassy Suites, obviously for location, but the setup's beautiful. There's actually very good parking for an area on Gun Barrel. We're huge fans.
I'm sorry.
So we're huge fans.
Thank you. Thank you. I've never had a bad meal there. Of course, the first couple of years I was wearing it out there. Just, it was so unique. And, we've got the private little glassed-in dining area called the Brothers Room. We didn't know what to do with it, so somebody said, just call it the Brothers Room. So They did, and I think Byron is putting a brothers' room in the St. John's there, where the Mountain City Club was, in the West Village. But it's been successful.
I think very little matches the outdoor experience when you have an event at the Westin. I've been several times. My son is a car enthusiast. I'm really excited. He's turning 16 on Thursday, and I bought him his first car yesterday. But he's a car enthusiast, and so we would go down to the Westin when the car shows were down there, and when the supercars come. But the layout, it's like you're somewhere else. The way that the outdoor amenities are, they have the pavers with the grass in between, and that's an experience all into itself just to walk the grounds.
Yeah. When my brother had, I think he had like 60 nursing homes at one time. He was having to travel around a lot, constantly around the nation, and he would take notes on where he stayed. This hotel did this hotel did that, and he would see things. I was here grinding it out in the office thing, and we were still partners, but totally different businesses. And we were doing real estate together. But he would write down these ideas. Like, he was staying somewhere once, and he got up, and there was a sheet of paper on his windshield, and his windshield had been washed. It was snowing and ice. His windshield was clean. It said, "Thanks for staying with us at the Marriott or the Hyatt or whatever it is. And now you can see Chicago better." Well, they do that all the time now here. Now you can see Chattanooga better. And people really appreciate that. We have always overbuilt and overspent. And at times it caught us, it would bite us. But I don't think I've done, I'm sure I've done something that I wish I'd done better. But for the last 25, 30 years, I just don't know of anything that we spared expenses on that didn't work out fairly well.
The Weston specifically brought a different challenge. You guys decided to keep an iconic building to Chattanooga in place. And I was cutting hair for one of the foremen when they were doing the construction, and they were talking about the challenges that come with basically retrofitting an office building with a hotel layout. How did that experience different? The process, I mean, with it being something where you're not starting from the ground up, what were the challenges with that were different than you guys just having your own plans and just a clean palette to work with?
It was a nightmare. I mean, there were so many things that went wrong. I just, when I talk to young people or younger business people that want to come and they want to talk to me, or I'm in a group of students, I think if my brother here was, we don't even talk about it. It was so bad. We don't bring it up. I mean, we had plans that were not correct. We had, I don't even know how to begin of everything that went wrong. The installers for the furniture walked off the job. And you think about putting in 260 TVs in with 4 elevators, and then getting the TV boxes out, getting the furniture up, because these were pros they just walked off the job and said, "We don't like this. We're out of here." So we're like, what is going on? And then we had ordered, I think, the chests of drawers, or some big, we used to call them shelf robes when I was a kid, the closets, the casework wouldn't go through the door.
Wow.
Would not go through the door. So you got 260 armoires that you got to unglue and take apart.
I can't even.
And you've got
imagine.
families all over Chattanooga that have planned weddings and events because it's going to open like October 1. And they're down there trying to get in the hotel and just check on things. And then you've got, you've got the hotel people that you report to. Starwood owned the Westins at the time. And in the middle of this, they sell to Marriott. So it was just one channel. And then we finally get the thing open, and it's leaking. The doors had not been properly installed on the outside. Water's blowing in. I'm trying to get, Marriott to sign off on this hotel so we can open. It was an unbelievable nightmare.
So you started off with Starwood and went to Marriott. Was that a net positive or net negative?
I don't think it really interfered with that. I mean, our deal was already on the books to get started. Marriott's a wonderful company to work with, just wonderful. To me, my experience with them has just been, we were in the matter, we're just redoing this whole building, and I'd never done a Marriott product, and they have guys that come down to check on your construction, see how you're coming. They kept saying, "You're never going to make it. You're never going to make it." And I said, "We'll make it some way. It'll happen." I said, "I don't believe it. Let's come back in 30 days." And they came back and he said, "Wow, you guys actually might pull it off, but I'm not your problem. This other lady that's over all operations, she's your problem. She'll never sign off on this deal." And so we get, she comes down and stays 5 days or 4 days checking things out. And this guy, the construction guy, says, "I'm telling you, if you got one little sign wrong or in the wrong place, you're going to have a problem." So I'll never forget, the hotel lobby was leaking. It had rained, like I mentioned before. The conference room that we're supposed to sign off in is taking in water. And there's this lady that meets me in the lobby, and I'm braced for, well, she's not going to sign off. She's going to shut me down. All these weddings and we had decided on the weddings and the venues, just give it to them.
Wow.
Just forget it.
Put yourself out there.
Yeah, maybe they can't stay in the rooms, but they can still have their wedding. The food will be free. The drinks will be free. The beverages, forget it. Believe it, through the grace of God, the lady met me in the lobby and said, "Are you ready to sign off on this hotel?" I'm like, "Yes."
You couldn't believe your ears, could you? You were waiting for the bad news.
If we can wade through this water here, we'll get into the conference room. And it just shows you how things work out. And so we're sitting, and there's pictures of it. Our assistant, or the lady that really runs our companies, was laughing. She sent me some pictures of it, of this lady and me signing off all the documents to open the hotel. And so I'm carrying her briefcase out. I'm carrying her luggage personally. And I get to where the valets are, and I said, I just want to tell you, I know this hotel's not ready. I know we've got a few things to clean up, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you just did. It's a miracle for me. And she said, "Ken, this hotel is so beautiful, and you'll clean this up. In a day or two, this will all go away." She said, "But this hotel is so beautiful, it has to be in the system today." So this isn't a cakewalk. This isn't just a walk in the park.
Right.
Every one of these situations can be brutal.
Well, it sounds to me, because you had this foreman telling you that this lady's not going to sign off on it.
Yeah, he was from Marriott.
Yeah. And so it sounds to me that there were other hotel owners that just weren't as committed to you as you were to putting a beautiful product together. I mean, yeah, there were some things to tighten up and some to work out, but it sounds to me like your commitment to having this beautiful hotel overwhelmed her to the point where she's like, "I can look past the little stuff. You obviously are going to get this tightened up."
Yeah, it did. It did. And I'm not knocking my competition, because there's some really good operators in Chattanooga, but only one or two that I know go the extra mile for the extra stuff. When we opened the Embassy Suites, you're supposed to put a little piece of chocolate on a pillow, or something like that. We put Little Debbie's.
Right.
You got a Little Debbie cake and pie, on your pillow. And at first we had little boxes. You got everything that came from Chattanooga. You had a Coca-Cola, you had a moon pie, you had a Little Debbie's cake, you had some Brack candy. It used to be Brock, and Brack bought it years ago. So those little things about Chattanooga, we found out that people, and the windshield thing, cleaning. Well, let's put it, Expedia has I think 300, they represent 300,000 rooms or something like that, or hotels.
All of them.
Yeah, all over the world. And I don't think it's 300,000. I just came from a bank board meeting, and my mind's awash with numbers right now. But anyway, we've been open a year, and we're voted in the top 10% of all the Expedia hotels, and we don't even know what we're doing yet. And it's because my brother had the idea, we'll run it like a nursing home. You don't want anybody upset in the long-term care business. The lobbies have to be immaculate.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to be really, really friendly. I mean, everybody has to be, on board about making sure you're greeted, and you just want to start off the first impression that is very positive. And I think that has been quite a redeeming factor for the operations. It's a good impression when you walk in usually.
Oh, it's a fantastic impression. A lot of oversight in the nursing home business. There's, federal regulatory bodies, there's HIPAA, there's all kinds of people that are breathing down your neck besides kids and grandkids of your clients that are in the building. They want to show up and they want to see good service. They want to see it to be clean. They want to make sure that their loved ones are being taken care of. That makes a lot of sense to take that approach. I attribute the success that we've had in the med spa industry to running it like a hair salon, and there's a loose correlation there between your example, but we've had a lot of success because we capitalized on the principles in a different industry doing the same thing. So I personally love that. We were talking about financial crisis just a minute ago, and I've been wanting to ask you this question since you said yes to come on the podcast. Finance has a tendency to work in cycles. So 84, I believe, is the bond crisis, and we have, a drop in the market, and we have a financial crisis, and then we have 92. There's a stock market crash, and right before the technology, we have this 8-year run where everything's amazing under Bill Clinton, and then in 2000, we have September 9th. And I was there, September 12th, excuse me. Wow, just got that wrong. September 12th. And I was actually in New York for September 12th. I saw the second plane hit live and in person from a mile. And my dad was an airline pilot. My mom was a flight attendant. I just got back from a honeymoon. Like, it was as traumatic as it could get for me. And so the 9/11 feels more serious to me than 2008. But again, it's another 8-year period where we have this nice long run. But there was a bad banking skill. I mean, the government was involved at some level for what they were allowing the banks to do to put us in that position. But then you skip forward another 8 years, and we don't have anything in 2016. And you skip forward another 8 years, and it's 2024. And there's been no financial crisis here in quite some time, and some people feel like we're due. And just to throw some stats at you, it was the highest credit card debt per person in our nation's history, combined with the lowest savings that we've ever had.
You talking about currently or in the past?
Currently, right now. And then, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have just announced, and that this has been in the works for a while. They're going to release almost $1 trillion in second mortgages to people that probably shouldn't have access to the equity in their home. That's why they had to go through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And I personally feel like we're set up for some sort of real estate correction, because with those components and with the amount of mortgage-backed securities that the last administration purchased, we had this huge run-up during COVID in the real estate market, and there's a ton of inflation. And it feels like there's a bubble. A lot of people say there's a bubble in the real estate market. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and if you feel like there's a correction coming, or if we're going to roll on with this kind of smooth landing theory.
Well, I'm not an economist. I've just got over 50 years I gauge my career by recessions.
There you go.
I think there's been umpteen presidents, and I don't know how many recessions. That's how I gauge my life. It's what happened then, what happened there. You see, since the 2008, it was ridiculous for it to be in, stated income could buy a house, stated income. I had relatives in the mortgage business. They were making a fortune. You need to I guess it was like, bring me some blank checks, and you qualify if you got a job, you got stated income.
That's right.
Well, anybody should have seen through that. And you can't blame it on any one president. It was going on since, Clinton, Bush, it was out there. And nobody was really ringing the bell. But really, what you're wanting me to say is, do we have another huge, huge worldwide situation coming at the? No, I don't think we do. Since those days, the banks have been reined in, and there's no more loans like or platforms where you could get a loan like a stated income or this or that. As a matter of fact, it's so tight that a young person can't buy a house.
That's correct.
And I'm asked by younger businessmen, what is the government going to do? I mean, we all want a house. What's really the plan? I said, well, I don't think as a borrower, which I've been my whole life as a borrower, unless you've got skin in the game, you're not going to get a loan. I mean, this loan to value, which I loved and still do, but if you're starting with a startup on something, you will have cash or some kind of equity or security in this loan. So I don't see the lending side of it as causing this another crash or anything. I mean, who knows though? I mean, like if you've got these tariffs coming, which are supposed to be coming, and I don't know if that's a bargaining chip to get. I know part of it's a bargaining chip to get, your adversary or your other party, get them in front of you at the table, and that's one of the oldest tricks in the book. But I don't know how deep the tariffs will go. They could have. I mean, I've been in a hotel business for a long time, and I remodeled a hotel in 2020, and the goods from China were so expensive that we found out that manufacturers in Vietnam could do what China was doing, so there was no tariff. So we had time to shift to another procurement agency in the hotel arena that could get us into the Vietnam manufacturers. So barring tariffs or no, I don't see 25 will not, I don't think, be a disaster. Nobody can really give you the assurance that we'd really like to have, but I don't see it.
Okay.
I don't see it yet.
So yeah, so forecasting some stability then. I think that's okay. That's what I wanted to know. I got online and I was excited to see you had a YouTube presence. A lot of successful entrepreneurs that if you're not 20 years old, you may not have a YouTube channel, but you have a YouTube presence, which was great. So I could pull some information. But I saw the corporate image on there. And I saw like a who's who of my friends that have places with the corporate image in those, really high-end office parks. How does building and selling those differ from developments like the hotel platforms?
Well, one thing, it was faster. Your payday came quicker. You didn't have any. I didn't have any competition. I mean,
Interesting.
I had this idea that you could own your building cheaper than you could pay rent, and then I would say, look, if it doesn't go up one dime in value, when you pay it off in 15 or 20 years, you have an asset that you can lease.
Here's a deed.
Or you can sell it if it doesn't go up at all. Well, of course, they all went up in value, and that was 20 years ago when I started this, or longer. Well, it's 25 years ago when I started this, basically. And a lot of those guys have paid those buildings off, and they're most of them that I've run into through the years are very, very happy they made the investment. But that was all by accident. All these things that happened to me by accident. And I tell this story about, I had this idea. We were in another recession in like 92, 93, and I wanted to get back in the office thing, but there was just no business. I mean, there was no demand really those first years of the 90s, and so I started doing residential subdivisions, and I was making a living on it. It was still like them. Kemmons Wilson told me, the founder of Holiday Inn, 40 years ago, he always walked around with a subdivision in his hip pocket.
All right.
I said, really? With all your, he said, oh yeah, that's a good business. I always keep 400 or 500 lots going. I'm like, 400 or 500 lots? Wow, at one time. And, but that was Memphis, and he was Cummins Wilson, the founder of Holiday Inn. So today I still like one or two subdivisions going, but I can't remember what we were supposed to be talking about. But yeah, I found that business is easier than because you're in and out. You know, you don't have to worry about staff and management, and you do have certain standards you have to comply with whatever kind of flags you're flying, a Hyatt or a Hilton or a Marriott. But the office thing was just so easy. I knew it couldn't last. It couldn't last. It was just too easy. And it was one of the most enjoyable times of my life. My kids were growing up. I had the resources to do finally what I wanted to do with them. And I always look back on that as a very, very good time. But it did come to an abrupt halt. I mean, it stopped.
Now, was this before 2008, or did the competition enter the marketplace?
No, I didn't have any competition. And I'm not saying because I'm so much smarter. I just control so much land that I had bought correctly at the right price at the right time. That I could just, I mean, look, we had the deal across the street from you. We had the deal on Shallowford Road near 153, and then we had the development going on at Northgate. And then I had Lee Highway. And, you know, you just had 4 or 5 different projects going all the time, and they were easy. The buildings were basically the same general contractor, same banks. You know, they were happy. So it was a very, very good time for me. You were talking about Clinton, and I was listening to an economist give a speech a couple of years ago at the Rotary, and he knew the best presidents that had ever served the nation economically. And he surprised me, but he was right. Clinton was probably one of the most balanced and successful presidents economically for the nation we've ever had.
He was the last one to balance the budget.
It was the first time we'd ever had I guess, I don't know, it was the first time that I could remember we had a balanced budget. And I would hear on the news about, well, you know, nobody really understands what a balanced budget means. I'm like, well, I don't. They said the economy will explode if it happens. And, buddy, it exploded. It was a wonderful time. And I do remember that if gas prices went up a nickel a gallon, Robert Rubin was on the phone. His secretary, the Treasury Secretary, was on the phone or on the way to the Middle East. I mean, that's how careful he was, because he understood the popular vote will take you back in office, just as we saw happen, 6 weeks ago.
That's right.
The popular vote. And to me, it's always been about your gas and your groceries. If people are pretty comfortable at the grocery store, pretty comfortable, at the gas station, you're probably a pretty popular president.
Well, I think when you win all of the swing states, that you've made your impression. You've obviously done something right. It can't just be rhetoric. Like, you're obviously resonating with the pain points that, like you said, the general population has.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you get out of touch with the general population, and Lyndon Johnson called it the Great Society, which it is a great society, once you start moving away from the core needs of the Great Society, like this initiative, or you're going to have to buy this kind of car, or you're going to have to live in this kind of house, you're doomed for failure. This is a market-driven economy. And when it's time for electric cars, they'll be everywhere. The American people are not stupid. I mean, some of the smartest people I've ever known were my relatives that worked in the carpet mills.
I saw a story where you used to sell carpet out of your trunk of your car. Is that true?
Yes.
That's a good story.
Yeah, I told you where we came from. All my relatives basically worked in the carpet mills. My dad would come in and we'd farm till dark, and everybody did it. I mean, it wasn't. We just lived in that kind of, agrarian society that, but you had to have more income. And so he worked all day, and then he'd come in at 4:30 or 5, and we'd get on the tractor and do our thing there, or take care of the few cows we had. But at that time in my life, Dalton, Georgia, had more millionaires per capita than any other city per capita in the nation. That's where the millionaires were hanging out per capita. And I saw this wealth. I saw it everywhere. Now, not in my community because we were poor, but I knew about those millionaires. I'd heard about the Saratines and Shaheens and the Jack Bandys, all those guys that had come down here in the 50s and just knocked it out of the park. And Saratine's dead now, but a friend of mine was house sitting 50 years ago, and he got me into his house on Missionary Ridge.
Wow.
And to this day, I still can't get over it. And I'm sure it's changed. And then after 50 years, it probably wouldn't be that. But for a kid 21 years old, where we came from, to see a house like that, you walk in the front door and you hear a waterfall.
That's pretty substantial.
It'll have an impression on you. And all I knew was I didn't care what I did. I just wanted to make more money.
So a millionaire in the 50s, I wonder what that breaks down to 75 years later. I mean, what's the math on that if we're trying to calculate for inflation?
There's no, my first job I got out of college, I was making $8,500 a year in 1971, 8,500. And so I've looked it up quite a few. I think the multiple is like 7 from 19, and so that would mean I was really making about $60,000 a year, 55. So I don't know where that breaks down to in the end of the 50s. And these guys that did this were brilliant. They knew how to manage money. If you start taking their earnings and the investments they probably made that we don't know anything about in the stock market and other deals and real estate, there's no telling what they were worth.
God, good to know.
I think Saratine he sold Coronet Carpets. Somehow he worked some kind of trade or merger with RCA, and he became chairman of the board of RCA. And when I was young, RCA was like Apple.
That's right.
Yeah, so, who knows?
Is RCA still around?
I don't think so. Well, I'm sure they are in some form. I don't know. I haven't heard about them. I mean, when we were growing up, you either had an RCA TV or a record player. That was the Sony.
We had one, a big tube set. Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things that I saw online, Ken, was you were leading a Bible study. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing, I think, to go to a Bible study. I think it's an entirely different leadership step to lead a Bible study. I think you can hold yourself out to the public in a lot of ways to be a trusted advisor if it's a business consultant or, in some other capacity. But to lead a Bible study, I think it's a huge leap of faith, literally, and an enormous responsibility. So are you still doing a Bible study, and how do you...
Oh, that clip you saw on YouTube?
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't interested in leading a Bible study at all. But a friend of mine got caught in this 2008 and 9, and he had a ton of rental property, and he'd always made his payments. And the lender here locally was in big trouble, and they couldn't make any more real estate loans. Like every other bank on every corner, they had too many commercial real estate loans, and they were no longer allowed or could make any more. He couldn't renew his loan. So he came to me and said he was desperate, didn't know what he was going to do. He really was. He was contemplating suicide. And
It's awful.
Yeah, and I said, look, don't do that. There's a way out of this. And I happen to know, had a buddy who was really 10 times the entrepreneur that, I don't even consider myself an entrepreneur, but he was 10 times the businessman that I am. And he owned a bank. And I said, look, I'll call my buddy up in McMinnville, and we'll see what we can do, or Murfreesboro, I think is where he was at the time. And so anyway, I called my pastor, who was a pretty good buddy. I just went to church there. I didn't have any role or anything. And I told him, I said, this is above my pay grade. I don't know what to do here. And he said, look, you've created these really nice gardens next to your house in the woods there, and invite him over Friday morning and tell him to read a Bible. We'll just read. And he said, and ask some of his buddies to come. Well, I called a few of our mutual friends, and they didn't go to church anywhere. But to support him, they came, and that was, well, you do the math, how was that, 16 years ago?
It was.
Something. And so, so my buddy that was having the financial issues did find a lender, got all it cured in 6 or 8. He never came back. Well, for the last 16 years, that study's still going on by the people that came because of the circumstances. Now, there's a lot of Friday mornings I'd like to roll back over and pick up another 45 minutes of sleep. But it has become, I guess, their church on Friday morning to come and hear Jerry Arnold as a pastor, to hear Jerry, who's a tremendous teacher. It's just, and if I have to call it off because of weather or somebody's in there, they're very disappointed. They're very disappointed. So you never know how these things are going to work out. I don't walk around with my religion on my sleeve, and I'm just not some Bible-toting Southerner out there trying to convert. I'm not. It happened. I didn't have anything of knowing that this. I didn't know how this was going to shake out, and I just finally got tired of going to a boring Sunday school class. I mean, you go to Sunday school to, you endure that a lot of times, just try to hear a good sermon. Well, I ran into a man 30 years ago, changed all that. He showed me how it should be, not the way it is. And I came back here and thought about it for quite a few years, and I asked this Jerry Arnold friend of mine, the pastor, said, this is what I'm thinking. He said, you wouldn't believe how well that's going to work. I'll help you get a room, and I'll announce it in church. Well, here we are, I don't know, 12, 14 years later, and, there's 350 people on our email list each week. Now, do they come to class? No. And some of them probably need to be taken off, but, there's 100 people show up every week. And I'm not always teaching, and I've found that to be successful, you got to find great teachers. And you got to mix them up, and they'll have a different slant on things. And I found them, and it took off like wildfire.
So what was it about the format that made it different? Obviously, it was more engaging, right?
Yeah, it was honest. It's a discussion class. You have a theme, you start it out, you kick it off, and people are allowed to ask questions that maybe they've been embarrassed or uneasy about asking about religion. And so it worked. I still don't really quite understand it all, but it did.
Let's talk about philanthropy for a second. I noticed it was the Westin, and I don't know if it was 2008. During COVID, there was a food giveaway that you guys did down at the hotel. Mm-hmm. It said, who came up with that idea?
My brother.
Your brother did. Byron did.
Yeah.
Okay.
We took some of the funds we had left over after we paid our bills with the COVID, whatever they called it, relief or whatever for the businesses. And it was a struggle. But he just felt like that they couldn't have done it with our COVID, and we didn't have enough to pay our bills really on an ongoing basis. But he just felt like it was the thing to do, that he would just have bags of groceries sacked up, and then the hotel employees would go out and hand it or put it in the cars for the people that came by. I think it was from 12 to 2 each day or something like that. So that was his idea, and I don't know. I know it was. I know it had to help somebody, but that was a two-edged sword for me. This was when the protests were going on downtown, and we were giving bags of groceries away to the needy from 11 to 2, and at 9 o'clock that night, they're breaking out my windows in the West Village. So it was kind of hard for me to sit still after trying to help and then being attacked. But we persevered. We didn't say anything. I wanted to confront him, and my brother just said, "Please don't. Please don't." He was right. I shouldn't have done that. Should never have even thought about doing that. I mean, I'm not talking about confront them in a physical way, but just let them know that, hey, you can't be breaking out our windows and, cutting up, they even tried to cut the arms off the Pioneer Man, the old Pioneer Bank statue, and just stuff like that. But that was his idea. I'm glad he did it. I'm sorry that we were attacked like we were, but I think he did, and I think we did the right thing, handling it that way.
How long did that go on?
You had this lady that was really a hardcore activist. I think she had that going on at nights in Miller Park. That's another thing I never really understood. Why should Miller Park be the location for that kind of carrying on and the violence we saw? It must have been a month. It was a long time.
I didn't understand the violence. I didn't understand the destruction. We're all going to go downtown, and we're upset about something, and so we're going to break things. Nobody won. It didn't change anybody's opinion, and if anything, I think it created more division amongst the community because the business owners, right? You're like, well, we're going to have to pay for that. We're going to have to fix it. Maybe somebody's out of work because you guys have to close the doors. It only hurts the workers. And a lot of this damage was done in some of the communities that these people live in where they were coming out at night. And I just didn't get it.
Well, right before this happened, there was a meeting downtown at City Hall, and there was when the city got in such, I won't say decay, but it was so run down in the city couldn't or didn't have the will back then to even empty the garbage cans half the time, and there was paper where they never got the leaves up. So Kim White came up with the idea that we need a business improvement districts, where you tax yourself extra, which is the last thing you want is to put an extra tax on yourself because you really feel like the city should be doing this. But they didn't, and I guess they couldn't really keep it like we wanted it. So we decided that we would join the bid. I didn't need to because we always had the little West Village area there in tip-top shape, and we were asked to join anyway because it might help other people to decide to get on board. And you're actually paying extra tax. Well, you had to get it approved through the city commission, and I went down there for the meeting, and I was called a racist for being on board with this, and then I was called a racist the same evening for building the West Village and building the Westin. I was called a racist for that. So I don't understand. I can't answer your question because I don't understand that. I don't understand how you conclude that someone improves an area that was in decline, and
it's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing. So I decided I can't. There's no need me even trying to reason this out with this group. And I think a lot of them were brought in out of town, and there's no reason. You can't reason with this. So you just have to hope that cooler heads will prevail, and it did. It worked out great. But I was really stunned when I was called that. Matter of fact, Bernie Miller, who's a black pastor, is a friend of mine. I brought him to my office. I said, "Let me ask you something. I was called am I a racist?" He said, "No, you're not."
Bernie, is there anything you need to tell me?
I mean, I've never thought of myself as that. He says, "You're not."
I thought Kim was sharp. Did you carry the way? who was elected for mayor when she ran?
Did I what?
Did you care either way who was elected when she ran for mayor?
Well, at the time I was supporting somebody else, but they would have both been candidates. And Tim Kelly, I think, turned out to be a very decent mayor. You know, I think he's trying to do the right thing. You know, there are no perfect politicians, but I'm not sorry that he was elected. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, he's gotten after the roads, and I'm out where we live. I've been very pleased with what we've seen. Was there a mayoral administration that created a better environment for you to develop in Chattanooga?
And you mean past mayor?
Yes.
Administration?
Yes.
Yeah, there's no question. Bob Corker.
Okay. Tell me why.
Well, things were just moving faster, and Tim Kelly's trying to improve this. Corker was a developer. He knew the frustrations of trying to get a building permit. He knew the frustrations of being delayed when you're paying interest on a project. I mean, he'd already been there. He'd had his boots on. He'd rolled up his sleeves. He knew the frustration. At that right now, and Tim Kelly's trying to change this. It takes 4 months to get a grading permit, just to grade a lot and put a sign on it for sale. 4 months.
Is that baked into the process, or are they that far behind?
That's just in the process. And I'm sure they could use more employees. But when Corker was mayor, I got a building permit or a grading permit in 30 days or 3 weeks. And on top of that, he brought a consultant in. I'll never forget this. This guy called me and says, "How can I help you as a developer?" And he said, "We're trying to speed up the permitting process." Well, that's great. Well, we'll take it. Well, today, and Tim Kelly inherited this, okay? It's just previous mayors that they just had no interest really in helping developers. And how in the heck do you think our property taxes get paid?
From developments.
That's a huge, huge part of the tax base. And I've been down there through the years with certain administration and treated pretty badly. Pretty badly. Like the staff was like, "Well, why are you here? Not you again." So it was a little hard for me to keep my mouth shut. I did. We did get what we needed eventually, but today that's trying to be improved. I know I've talked to Tim Kelly. He's trying to undo it just evolves. You put this regulation on, well, that's okay, and then another one, and next you know, after 8 years, you're struggling, or 10 years, 12 years. But it's something that has to be addressed. But Corker was, as far as I'm concerned, the best mayor I've ever seen. The best.
Well, I used to do Liz's hair. I'm sorry he's, not as relevant in Chattanooga anymore. I know he's down in Florida doing tremendous things with property development, and it's taken his whole real estate game to a whole new level. But I still wish his leadership was here in Chattanooga. Mm-hmm. Helen Burns Sharp. Does that ring a bell with you at all?
Yes.
Okay. I did Helen's hair for a long time, and she had a bone to pick with the way that the TIFs were handed out for property development. And in one of her issues or axe to grind was how it took away from the budget, especially for the school system. Do you feel like those have been abused in Chattanooga for property development, or is it something that's been handled in a way that was equitable, or the way that they were supposed to be used? Because the story that I got was, and this is probably, I'd have to go and did some of my own research, was, she felt like there was a tremendous abuse. And it was kind of like my first introduction in understanding how you got those sort of tax incentives to build for development. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, do this for me. You go back in 2024 and you see how many TIFs or pilots were issued in Chattanooga. And you go to Knoxville. another midnight. Don't go to Nashville. Go to Murfreesboro. Go to Knoxville. Go to Clarksville. Clarksville, by the way, will be the 4th largest city in the state very, very soon because of the restrictions we have on us. They're coming. I almost went up there a year ago and did a deal. Pilots, TIFs, free land, and anything they could get to throw at me for me to come. That tells you the difference between how we operate in this city versus other cities that are thriving. Now, I have bankers that have come down come to Chattanooga for years, and I'll say, well, I need to get this financed. It's why? Because I said, I need it. He said, well, go to the city and get a pilot on it. I said, forget it. Well, you can get a TIF over here. We do them. I see it all the time in Nashville. I see it all the time in Knoxville, constantly, in Huntsville. Not here. You tell me how many TIFs and pilots were issued last year in Chattanooga, and then you look around the other mid-sized cities, and you will see, I can't imagine anyone saying that that's been abused in Chattanooga, and it's needed. We need far more pilots, and we're getting a lot more, and it's my understanding, and Mrs. Sharp could be right about this, but it's my understanding that the educational side of those property taxes are not reduced. Now, if you've got some land and it's paying $10,000 a year and you do a pilot, you still have to keep the $10,000 on the books. It's not like it all goes away.
Okay.
Now, and I'm not a pilot expert because it was impossible to get one. I should know more, but every time I tried to get one, I was shot down. So as far as I know, pilots and TIFs have just been locked up. They've got mothballs in there.
Okay. I don't know enough about it. I don't have any historical knowledge. And Helen passed in 2020. COVID got Helen. And so her argument with this, or my first, the whole topic.
Are you saying she's passed away?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry to hear that.
But I got her side of the story for 3 hours every 6 weeks, so these conversations were from 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Because we talked about it several years before she passed in 2020, and so I guess what you're saying is that if we had more pilots and we had more TIFs, we would be having more development in Chattanooga right now.
Yeah, and all due respect to Mrs. Sharp, I never agreed with her. Now, I didn't write any letters to the editor. I didn't show up at any of these meetings. I mean, it was just it was too hard of a sled to pull because nobody seemed to ever get on board. All I'm saying is you talk to any other developers, any other bankers in the mid-sized cities in Tennessee, and you see how many are coming, and it's a lot to those cities, not to us. If we get one, it's headline news.
I didn't know that.
Now, I could be wrong. That's why I'm asking you check it. Okay?
Well, then I'll go do some more homework. And I wasn't even prepared to ask that. We got into real estate development. I was like, what was Helen saying? And I got it was TIFs. To stay on the real estate development side and talking about downtown.
Well, I know more about pilots than I do TIFs. And I'm just saying, I don't think we've abused the pilot thing in Chattanooga 1 inch, 1 ounce, period. Now, TIFs, I don't know that much about. That's for usually a pretty big deal, and
usually you're trying to persuade somebody to come to your town, and that's why you're giving the tax incentive, so they don't have to pay the property taxes for a period of time. Not typically used for someone that's already in Chattanooga,
right?
And they're just looking to move or expand locations, and so I kind of feel like she thought that was being abused a little bit, because if you were already here, you didn't need any additional tax incentive. Anyway, and I think a lot of what she was saying was that properties were built with the TIFs, and people were blowing out of them and selling them, with the locked-in profit of not having to pay the property taxes for a certain period of time. And also in there, it seems that we had prior mayors that weren't worried about where the parking was going to go for all of these new buildings, and they stopped requiring the parking garages and having some sort of accommodation for the new people that are downtown. But I can't attest that
I see her point on that. Like they'd say, well, you're going to do the deal anyway, So why should we help you? Well, we needed all kind of help. If let's just take the West Village and the decay and decline that it was in when we showed up. One mayor would give us a pilot on that. The next mayor wouldn't. He said, Andy Burke said, I'm not giving any pilots to a hotel, period. Well, if there was ever a need for a pilot and help, it would have been in that area.
At that time.
In that building at that time. Now, the Westin is a success story. I want to go next door and build something else like that, and I go ask for a pilot, they're going to laugh me out of City Hall. Like, are you kidding me? But if you go to another area in Chattanooga that's in decline or and they're everywhere, I think you should be considered, if you ask for a pilot, that you should get consideration. I'm not saying you should be granted it, but you shouldn't just have the door slammed in your face just because you walk in and say, I want a pilot.
Understood. Tell me what do you know about the Bend and what they're going to build where the Allston plant was, and then maybe tie that to what's going to go where the foundry is on South Broad.
I don't know. Jimmy White's a really good guy, and he's a friend of mine. And we talked about the Bend a couple of years ago, and he told me all the things that he felt like he had coming in. And I don't know if that's still. He had everything from grocery stores. I think he has been successful in bringing in a large office user, I think. But, I think it's great. That area could be such a showplace. I think Siskin Steel should be gone. And it's a great company, but at the wrong place at the wrong time. That's a showplace of property. I would love to hear that Siskin Steel has found another location they can move to. And in those situations, to clean up a certain part of town, I think whoever does it should be, if there's an instance where Siskin Steel should be incentivized to leave. Not that they would, not that they're not a great company, and not that the former owners are Helen Pregelman and Merv. Oh, they're good people. Merv is gone now. It's a great business, and it serves a great purpose. But I think if you could get the Bend really cleaned up and going through there, it's tremendous. I applaud the Bend and Jimmy White and his partners for what they're doing. As far as the foundry site there, I don't really. I'm just glad whatever goes there is happening. It's just been a blight for so long. If you're sitting in this traffic coming from Birmingham or Nashville, which is that really needs to get fixed.
It's ugly.
That's really a problem, big problem. So you're in a traffic jam and you're looking at it for 20 minutes. It's really not a good impression for Chattanooga. So whether the baseball stadium should have been there, I'm not a big fan of that. I don't really think that's the answer to the problem there. But if it helps get the thing kicked off, I think it's wonderful.
I would love to see something like the Battery down in Atlanta, where the baseball stadium is. Mm-hmm. They've done such a tremendous job at Truist Park in creating a destination. Whether there's a baseball game or not, it's a blast to go down there and walk around.
It is. I don't think the Lookets have the draw that, of course.
No.
But just the idea, who knows? The problem is if you don't do something, you have to do something to get that kicked off. And maybe it doesn't work out, like I said when we sat down here to begin with. That probably won't exactly work out like they want it to, but it'll work. That thing will land on its feet. It will eventually, maybe through the years, it will be a tremendous development.
Do you know what's holding it up? Do you know what's holding it up?
Do I know what?
Where the foundry is? Do you know what's holding up the development of that property?
The foundry?
Yes.
I don't. I didn't think anything was holding it up.
Okay, I just keep expecting it to move faster. Rumors. I thought I understood that because there was a foundry there, that there's some sort of biochemical cleanup process that goes because of the materials that were being used.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is. Yeah.
And I don't know enough about it, but then that's back to more homework for
It
me.
would have to. I mean, a foundry is, that's a tough site. If you've had a foundry there or something like that, or any manufacturing that's been manufacturing for, generations, typically you have to go through that process. But it can be cleaned up. Most anything can be cleaned up if you have the money.
Well, speaking of relocation and maybe underutilized businesses downtown, what about moving the chicken plants? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
When we were looking at our second location for Hairbenders, Matt Holder was building a building right down there by the UTC football field, and we went down there to look at it. It was gorgeous. It would have made a ton of sense. And then the wind blew, and I said, Matt, there's a dead body out here somewhere. And I had just never been downtown on Main Street or in that area when they were fired up that plant and the wind was blowing. He was like, no, that's the chicken plant. He says it.
I talked to a former mayor from years ago, and he said, that provides so many jobs. You got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding. This is where incentives need to come into play. This is where your pilots, they need to move it somewhere. Get the developer to help them move, and give the developer a pilot or something. Yeah, that place needs to go. And now.
When I asked about it, I did get an education, and a lot of the individuals that work at the chicken plant, the processing plant, have got to stay at these extended stays where it's, $12 a week to be there. And I said, that could create an issue. If people are walking to work, they almost need a rural environment. But it's a shame because it kept me from moving down there. And who else didn't move down there because of the chicken plant?
Move them there, and then wherever they move to, the chicken plant has buses running that they can catch a ride to wherever it is, or get Carter to extend their lines. 10 miles or whatever. There's ways to do it. But it takes incentive to do it, and it takes the will. That place needs to go.
Byron's got a fundraiser that he does, and he was involved in a pretty serious accident. I think it was last year. And but something that's close to his heart is Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. Is that purely a play for him, or is that something that the family has a deep concern for, as far as picking that specific a condition for the fundraiser?
One of his friends that's involved in that had a partner who got it, and I think Byron already met this guy through racing, and then his friend came down with it. He's a world famous guy, and I think it really rocked them. It shocked them that this could really happen, and I think that's they tied it in with racing. You have fun, but you could still raise money. So, and then he met Dr. Devlin, and he's big into, he knows what he's doing, and that's just how it sort of evolved on out.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you want to be instant success as a doctor in Chattanooga, you need to be a neurologist like Dr. Devlin. That guy is in such demand. I mean, the hospitals are the highest bidder for his services. And he actually diagnosed me with the breathing condition. I have to use the CPAP machine. Mm-hmm. And we need more. He is an amazing doctor. It's I wish we had more Dr. Devlin.
He's amazing. Yeah.
So let's talk about family for a second. So I had the pleasure of having Ken Jr. on, and is following in the healthcare route. And we'll have him on multiple times as his journey takes evolutions, and he's trying to launch his new program. But I want to talk about Larson for a second. Mm-hmm. And so we both have a daughter going off to Alabama. And so she went, down to Tuscaloosa and came home, and she's gotten involved with the family business.
My daughter?
Yeah.
No, she doesn't.
Well, she got into it was real estate, and then
Oh yeah. When
and
she got out,
she did the
did that.
Westin, she did the hotel for a little bit, and
Yeah.
then into brokerage. But she got into, I should say, she got into real estate.
Well, she in college she just worked at the Ruth Chris office, and then she's a very smart girl, and then she did get her real estate license for residential, and she did that for a brief period, but now she likes being a mom. She's a mom now.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
So, how many grandbabies do you have, Ken?
6, and they are the light of our lives.
So, I guess this is the second time around. Is it more fun?
It is. It is. You always hear this. Well, you can send them home. After playing. Well, after you get 6, it is good to know there's there's
Place for them to go.
but I can't wait for them to get there. And let me not make sure that I have 6. Let me count them here. Just I know that's right. But 3, 5, 6. Yeah, 6. 4 boys and 2 girls.
A lot's changed since you had little ones to look after at that age. What's different now from when you did it the first time?
Oh, I think the parents still have the parents, my kids have the same issues that every parent has. I mean, you got to get the homework done, and there's somebody sick with a cold every other week or something. Those are just the typical things that you go. But I think to me it's gratifying to see that your kids have landed on their feet. They have their own families now, and but I'm just like every guy that has grandkids. My grandkids are the smartest, the prettiest. Everybody's grandkids are the smartest kids in the world. So I fit right in that mold.
If you were going to go to dinner with one entrepreneur or one architect or one real estate developer, somebody that absolutely piqued your interest and you were like, I got to go to dinner with that person. Who is it and why?
Oh, I don't know. Locally? Is that what you mean?
You can pick somebody.
There's a guy like Knoxville or Nashville. His name is Colin. Anyway, he's a major hotel guy. Major. I think he was involved with Opryland. He managed that, and I can't remember his name, but I met him during COVID. There was the governor asked certain people in certain towns to be on a committee, and I met him because the world was melting down during COVID, and I learned so much from this guy. If you give me 1 second, my contacts, I can tell you the guy's name. I knew very little. I didn't know anything about this guy. I should have, but let me tell you what his name is. Colin. Maybe it was Collin. Colin Reed. He's a player in the hotel business industry. Major, big time. And it was really interesting learning more about him. And I think he'd been the manager of the Opryland Hotel or something, and other things like that. Big resort. Huge resort developer and manager. And he would be the hotel guy that I would be interested in having dinner with. Just a terrific guy. There's a man that works for Marriott who I met, and he would be an interesting person. I could have gone to dinner with him already and haven't, but he's way up the ladder with Marriott. What does Marriott have? Like 23,000 employees or something like that.
Something, yes.
And he came to see us a couple of years ago. And the thing that impressed me about him was the way he walked up to people. It was a lady mopping the floor. He walked up to her in his Irish accent. Said, "How are you? Tell me, how are you today? Tell me, how's it going? I need to know." And he did that to everybody. And we were in the Westin, and we took the elevator up to the Sky Bar, and I said, I'm relatively new. I've only been in this business a few years. And he said, "Oh, Ken," says, "the hotel business. It's a wonderful, wonderful business. It's wonderful." I thought, man, if I could get up every day feeling like that, just his presence impressed me. Anybody that could be that positive with that many problems and that many people working under him, I thought, this is a guy that I could hang out with, just with that kind of power and that humble, just blew me away.
There's no substitute for experience. You can't give that to somebody. And you're accumulating that experience in the hotel industry. And in the interview, a lot of questions that I've asked, we keep coming back to the hotels. This is clearly the ambition right now is, Ken DeFoor with the hotels. Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years, specifically in the hotel industry?
I'll be gone. I'll be
so?
gone. Yeah. I'm 75 years old next month. So I don't, what I'm trying to do is pick my battles and you can see what happened to our previous president. To kid yourself that you're not going to start winding down physically and mentally by the time you're 80 years old, you're kidding yourself. You got to be kidding. And we saw it happen to our president. And it's going to happen to everybody. Oh, you hear about some great man running a company till he's 90. Well, and Warren Buffett is the exception. He's 92 or 3, whatever he is. He's the exception. Plus, he drinks 2 or 3 Cokes a day. I don't know how he does it.
Charlie Munger, too.
Yeah.
Another exception to the rule.
Yeah, they were exceptions. But for most of us that I don't think beyond 2030. I want everything in order. I don't want to be. I want to be busy. I want to still be working, but building hotels, or by the time I'm 80 years old, I don't want to do that. I will enjoy it, but I think I'll just be trying to manage what we have the best I can, because you can't kid yourself about the inevitable.
You seem to take a lot of joy in whether it's property management or hotel management. What's Ken DeFoor like to do when he's not managing something for fun?
I'm on the tennis courts 3 to 4 days a week.
Are you in the pickleball craze?
No, I'm
Okay.
not. My
You're
knees,
purist.
No, what knees I've got left will be dedicated to tennis,
Okay.
not pickleball. And I spent my whole life trying to get off the farm. What we really like is putting in our gardens. My dad left me his planters, where you plant corn. He left me his planter. We put in I don't know how big it is, but I've learned how to fertilize it and how to double plant it. We get 4,000 ears of corn every summer. I plant 30-something tomato plants. I know how to stake them. I probably know more about tomatoes than anybody in Chattanooga, and I still can't grow them. But I do better than most people. And we give away 50 pounds of tomatoes every day during the summer.
Really?
Yeah. And it's been going on for years. And now my friends are waiting. They start asking me around June when the tomatoes are going to be in. And so that's a lot of fun. I never thought I'd be a gardener, but I've learned a lot. I've got tons of equipment to handle it. And flowers. I've created some things beside my house, down in some trees with the woods next to my house. The ivy was growing up. It was like a forest full of ivy. And for years, I wondered what to do with it. And I was talking to my landscaper about 15 years ago. I said, after all we've done, after all we've created, you'd think we could come up with something for this beautiful scenery down there, this ivy, and I know it's got snakes in it, and who knows, but it's beautiful. He's handed me some irrigation flags. He says, this afternoon, put your boots on, stake out where you want a path, and when you come home, you'll have it. And when I came home, I had this 6-foot wide path winding down through these trees and this ivy, and it was 8 inches deep and hardwood mulch, and it had a perfect border. The ivy was the border. Well, Mrs. McKee over at Southern Adventist University years ago had created a prayer garden with music in the trees and lights along the path. And I thought, if I ever get financially able, I want to create something like that. So I did. I mean, it evolved into way too much work. But there's music in the trees. There's flowers down the path. There's lights.
Wow.
Little benches to sit in. And I'm very proud of that. I consider my family and my gardens my greatest achievement. Forget the buildings.
That's fascinating. Did you keep the family farm in Dalton?
Calhoun.
Calhoun?
No, really, it was recycled. No, my dad sold it and moved up here, but I don't know how I ended up with those planters, but it's been good for a lot of guys that grew up in the city to come, and they like to see how it's planted. They like to see how you hook up the equipment, and they actually come and they till it. They keep the weeds out, and they get the corn as much as they can haul out.
Wow.
So it's been good for a lot of people. A lot of people.
So, not to get too personal, do you live out in the Collegedale area? Is it where's home at?
Yeah, I live on Ottawa-Ringo Road, just behind Four Corners, 30 seconds behind Four Corners, heading toward Ringo or East Brandon Road. I've lived there for 38 years.
Wow. We got my buddy David Parker lives out there. Are you close in proximity to David?
And he the trucking guy?
Yes, sir.
No, he's like 10 minutes down the road.
Okay.
Yeah, toward Ringo.
Okay.
Or 7 or 8 minutes, yeah.
That's a beautiful area.
Yeah, it is. I've enjoyed living there.
Well, Ken, I think I'm all out of questions.
Okay. I think it's interesting when I talk to students, they want to know how I did as financing and how was it when you were a finance major and then when you were going to school here and all that.
So you were a finance major?
No, I'm a journalism major.
Okay.
And I used that to try to kind of market myself and, believe it or not, actually learn how to speak, which you wouldn't believe it by listening to me today. But it was really good for me. And I marvel at how journalism has deteriorated.
Deteriorated, that's the word I was going to say.
It's just shocking because if you don't have a story, well, let's just make one up. And that's not journalism.
No, it's not. And so with my kids, I'm constantly trying to give them context for what they see on TV. Like I'm having to explain it to them. So I was a political science major at school, and so I've always had a deep love for politics. Grew up in Washington D.C. In my formidable years, and I thought I was going to be a lobbyist when I got out of school. And so I obviously with the elections, I'm super invested in. But it's terrible that they're not the watchdog for the government. And that they can be in bed with the government, pushing agendas and ideologies instead of holding people accountable. I mean, journalism was supposed to be the last, I don't know what the
last bastion to protect democracy.
That's right, and you are shaping the way people think and feel about everything that's around them, and I'll tell you what, the impetus for this podcast was my new fascination with YouTube. And I'll thank my consultant and good buddy, Andrew Boyd, for that. In August, it was the first time in our nation's history, and the streaming services are relatively new, that the U.S. population was getting more of their information from streaming services, specifically YouTube, and not from traditional media because they're just tired of the journalism. Because it's not journalism, it's sensationalism. It's talking heads. They've got a story and they're going to spin it. And if you had been there to see whatever it was they were talking about, you would probably feel completely different than the way that they're broadcasting or conveying it to the public. And I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like my eyes have been kind of pulled back, and I'm seeing so much of what journalism and media is. And it's why I get almost all of my information from YouTube or streaming services, because I can kind of pick and choose what I want to listen to. And first of all, I can get around the commercials, but I can go to the source from the people where they're the trusted advisor for whatever I'm looking for. Because whether it's Fox or CNN, you're just getting their slant on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I became very, very careful about what I was reading about 70. I do know something about American history. I know something about George Washington, which most people don't, which is shameful. Every college graduate should have read Washington, His Excellency. Should have been required reading before they really graduate, because most of them have no idea how this country started, who started, and that's why George Washington was the greatest president that ever lived.
Brilliant.
And so I read some article from some young girl about the best first ladies in the history of the nation. Well, she obviously had no idea what she was talking about. She'd never read history. She just pieced together something that she thought was interesting. She had no clue who the very best. She didn't even mention Abigail Adams or Dolly Madison. Most people don't even know that James Madison was an epileptic. She would come in when he was getting under stress and get him out of here. And in his age, you were still demon-possessed if you had epilepsy. And here he is president. So she would get him out of the meetings and make him rest. So there's just so much that people are writing about. They have no idea what they're saying. So I just I began to discount that, and it just and we talk about the political system, how bad the country won't survive. Well, Andrew Jackson shot his vice president.
That's right.
And I learned that from our this John Meekum that comes and lectures for Pinnacle Bank. Pinnacle Bank sponsors it. He's a tremendous writer, and so
I have a signed copy of his last book, by the way.
On Lincoln. Yeah. But I mean,
No, Thomas Jefferson. I'm sorry. Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah. Well, I still have really high hopes because democracy works. We saw it. We saw it a few weeks ago. It still works. Just got to be careful and make sure we're getting the best people we can get at the times we need them. And so I'm certainly optimistic right now about the nation, and have been. I'm a Ronald Reagan disciple. I'm sort of independent in the way.
Me too.
And I think it's interesting when you talk to young people about Reagan, because he's been so poo-pooed the last 20 years by the left. I mean, everything that went wrong in the nation, it was Ronald Reagan's fault. When Ronald Reagan really saved the nation to a certain degree. And it's just comical how that's going to disappear now, I hope. And but I'm optimistic. I really am.
If one party or the other, I'll just say it. I mean, if the Democrats or the left is demonizing somebody for years, and you just said decades, it's because they were doing something right, not because they were doing something wrong. Those were very good years that we had. I'm a huge fan. I'm a political historian, and what a great time to have such an amazing president. And I wish it would have produced a second term for George Bush Sr. when he got a chance to run, but it didn't happen.
Yeah. We'll see how it shakes out. I'm optimistic about the future. I think the biggest problem, if we can get the deficit under control, I'll never live to see it paid off or back down to zero again. But if they can start making some strides, then I think the nation will be safe. I think that's the biggest threat to this nation.
I was watching the Treasury Secretary confirmation, and he said it as good as I have heard it. We don't have an income problem. We have a spending problem.
Yeah.
And a lot of spending that goes on in the budget, and I've had a lot of these heated conversations in the last couple of months. We're going to have to get rid of the bureaucracy that's in Washington, D.C. A lot of these policies and a lot of things that are getting funded are absolutely ridiculous. A lot of back scratching that's going on. There's a lot of special interest groups. I don't appreciate the way Big Pharma owns so many people in Congress and government, the FDA. some of the things that you see now that, like added sugar is a part of a good diet. I mean, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Like you, I'm optimistic. I haven't been optimistic in a while, but I think there's a lot of work to do in the next 4 years. And unfortunately, I think with just the way the House works, really you've got about 23 months. And it'll be interesting to see what Donald Trump can do with a super bill. It'll be the largest legislation in the history of the world by leaps and bounds. And I hope he gets it done because that might be his only chance to get any meaningful change
it could
done.
be. The biggest challenge, I think, is when you've had programs going on for decades, and you say, okay, we've given you, like, let's say $100 billion last year. We're going to hold your budget at $100 billion. Well, they start screaming, well, you've cut our budget. You've cut it. See, that's the mentality that you can't be afraid of anymore. We haven't had any cuts. You need to manage your budget now. You got $100 billion or $50 billion, but they say they've experienced a cut. Well, you haven't. You need to take care of your business and be careful with your funds. So, I don't know. Once that'll be a challenge to certain politicians.
It will, but if something's been around for a long time and we just don't need it anymore, get rid of it. Give those people, give them the, what do they call them? They give them money after they eliminate the position. They'll get some kind of package so that they can, get a job somewhere. And if you've worked in Washington, D.C., you won't be unemployed very long if you've been in one of the larger agencies. But if you're going to be responsive to the people, then if it's not serving a purpose and we're paying tax dollars for it, just get rid of it.
Yeah. I just really don't get into those conversations because I think eventually you're right that'll all shake out. But it's like Jamie Dimon told Nancy Pelosi months ago. Said, your biggest threat to this nation is your deficit, because if we suddenly can't pay what we owe around the world, it would take 100 years to recover from it. And I believe Jamie Dimon knows what he's talking about. So anyway, that's my biggest issue right now is the deficit.
The answer to who I'd want to go to dinner with, and it hasn't changed in a long time, it would be Warren or it would be Jamie. Those would be someone I want to go to dinner with and just
you're thinking bigger. You're thinking way, way, way ahead. I would love to go to dinner with Warren Buffett, just before it's too late.
Before it's too late. And I hope he has done something to pass along the juice. My single largest holding, individual equity holding, is the Berkshire B shares. I can't afford the A shares, even though you can buy them fractional. But I have such faith in the way that they invest, and to skip over Nvidia and to miss Bitcoin and maybe blow out Apple a little early and still be crushing it. I mean, he has enough money in cash that he could buy most publicly traded companies. I forgot where it was the last time I looked. It's $60 billion in the checking account. I mean, there's almost anything that he couldn't buy. And right now, there's a lot of companies that are in that holding company type that are accumulating cash, and it's great for the balance sheet. It shows a lot of strength, and it shows in the stock price.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll ever see the likes of him again.
Anyway, Ken, it's been a real pleasure and a real joy. Thank you for coming on my program.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Enjoyed it.